Êtes-vous un petit con?
Non, je suis pas un petit con. Des fois, je peux être un petit con. De temps en temps, allez, ouais, je peux dire, ouais, je suis un petit con. De temps en temps. De temps en temps, je peux être un petit con.
Pourquoi?
Je sais pas, j'aime bien de temps en temps. J'aime bien emmerder, c'est comme ça. De temps en temps, j'aime bien embêter les gens.
The mere mention of his name gets me mad. Samir Nasri.
In the early noughties, there wasn't a hotter French prodigy than Samir Nasri. Raised in Saint-Timor-les-Vallons to the north of Marseille, there was only one place for the street footballer. In 1997, at the age of 9, he was welcomed into the academy of Marseille and spent the next 7 years charming all around him with not only his likeable character but his professionalism, not to mention what he could do with the ball. By the time he left home to live amongst his teammates in Bastide, the teen's attacking game was exceptionally well-rounded, but it took just one summer for heads to turn in his direction. The Under-17 European Championships of 2004 were to be on his home soil, and as a figurehead of Génération 1987, Les Bleus had a group of youngsters with bright futures, and after a perfect 5-game run, France went on to collect the trophy for the first time in Châteauroux, thanks to a decider from the man of the moment. Back in Marseille, he'd returned with an enriched profile, and a pro contract was slid his way with a Ligue 1 debut to come that September. He had to earn his place, but manager José Anigo assured him his time would come, so he continued clocking in the allotted top-flight minutes and training hard. Les Phocéens were a far cry from their early 90s peak, and President Pape Diouf was anxious for the Champions League funding, even dismissing Anigo mid-season when results dwindled. Luckily for Nasri, the replacement Philippe Troussier shared his faith in the young midfielder, using him much more regularly, and a first goal finally came. Used in a variety of positions, including flanker, deep line midfielder and substitute, his versatility came in handy for the White Wizard, and in just a few months, Nasri had gone from a CFA graduate to a full-fledged member of the senior team at just 17 years old. In science terms, 3 tests will determine a theory. So when Jean Fernandez now stepped through the doors of the Velodrome, also instantly taking to Nasri, it became clear that his was a talent that couldn't be overlooked. He gave him a more prominent role and introduced him to another of the nation's prodigal sons, Franck Ribéry, who mirrored Nasri in more than a few ways. While he was up and down the right, the newcomer was on the left, dropping defenders and feeding deliveries into Mamadou Niang, as Marseille found their formula, winning the now abolished Intertoto Cup. Though the team was on the rise, Nasri felt he had more to contribute than the 2 goals from the wing, and wanted the number 10 role, but at 5'9" the spindly teen didn't have the build for holding off centre-halves, so the local boy set out to bulk up. Albert Imun noticed his burgeoning brawn, and under a 4th coach in just 3 years, Nasri got what he wanted, becoming a permanent playmaker at the head of the diamond behind the 2 frontmen. Now able to blend his newfound physicality with the magical dribbling, Nasri's true calling came to light, and he soon became the jewel of an improving outfit. There was more to him than just speed and skill. Nasri's weekly performances showcased an intelligence, composure and poise rarely seen in someone bordering 20, consistently providing 5-star service to the forwards. Samir's maturity was shining through off-pitch also, holding on to his humility by living with his parents on their council estate and rebuffing certain comparisons.
C'est le chouchou, c'est le minou. On va le monter comme Zidane.
The Algerian ancestry, Marseille origins and new position meant L'Équipe couldn't help themselves, dubbing him the new Zizou by the time of his 20th birthday.
C'est un héritage qui est lourd, très lourd à porter. Et que quand on est jeune joueur, c'est très difficile de porter un tel héritage et Moi, je pense pas être le futur Zidane.
Though he didn't want it, the tag had now stuck, and after the international call-up, it became his moniker. France's Young Player of the Year was now Marseille's main man, especially after Ribéry's move to Bayern in the summer of 2007, a mantle he eagerly embraced. Ankle trouble and a serious viral infection looked to derail him. Though now seasoned, this was a hardened Nasri, physically and mentally, peaking in confidence. Giving out dummies and body feints like a master salesman, the little prince of the Velodrome had swagger about him in the middle of the park, now with all the awareness and strength to dictate. Teeing up the strikers with pinpoint passing, every aspect of his game had flourished, and his numbers started getting serious. Utterly two-footed, he could create and finish, neatly finding the pockets from close range or rippling the net from 30 yards. 6 goals and 12 assists by June 2008 marks Nasri's finest year in the white and blue, setting him up for a spot on the plane to the heart of the continent for his first European Championship. However, he only appeared for a total of 28 minutes in what was a miserable tournament for Les Bleus, sent packing before the knockouts. Speculation was rife around his name, but transfer gossip was nothing new to Nasri, and he signed on to 3 more years in Marseille, until the call came in from a certain compatriot. An archetypal Arsene Wenger player with pace, promise and temperament, the appeal was mutual, given Arsenal's history with the French and Wenger's reputation for nurturing young talent. So Nasri chose the Emirates as the place to develop.
Et Arsène Wenger, on se rencontre en fait durant la saison, on se rencontre à Paris, on discute. Et il me fait part de ses plans, de comment il veut jouer, tu vois. Et c'était, pour moi, l'étape parfaite avant le top club. Et c'est un entraîneur français, il va m'aider, il va m'aider à m'acclimater, tout ça et tout. Et c'est ce choix-là qu'on a fait parce que j'avais le Real Madrid, j'avais le Barça, mais eux, c'est des machines à laver. Ils prennent, tu vois.
Within his first 4 Premier League minutes, an early winner gave the Gunners all they needed to know about this precocious talent.
Oh, the Frenchman scores on his debut for Arsenal!
Matching the division's intensity, he'd given Arsenal a new cutting edge, and a double in a 2-1 beating of Ferguson's European champions proved it beyond doubt. In the adjustment year, he'd hit the ground running, and his coach couldn't be happier, though the follow-up was less idyllic. Fracturing his fibula a month out of the 09-10 kickoff, we didn't see Nasri until October, in which time his direct competition André Arshavin had burst onto the scene, and how the Frenchman would fit back in became the concern. Still, after a 3-month layoff, he returned on the right side with goals in back-to-back Champions League games. Afraid to disrupt the Russians' purple patch, Wenger lowered Nasri into a deep-lying role, where he could still create, but also help out defensively. But it was a waste. He needed to be in amongst it, higher up, taking on people and crafting chances. That was what made Nasri box office. In every sense, he was taking a back step, finding himself trapped in the shadows and stuck in second gear, ultimately costing him a place in the World Cup squad. Excluded alongside Benzema and Valbuena, it was a controversial selection by Raymond Domenech, but there was more to the choice than just form. 2 years ago, Nasri was called out in the autobiography of William Gallas, his Arsenal teammate, for insolence during the Euros camp, and since then their relationship got increasingly strained.
Je lui dis, tu me dis plus bonjour, je te dis plus bonjour. On va éviter d'être hypocrite l'un envers l'autre. Je t'aime pas, tu m'aimes pas, on le sait, et voilà. À la fin de l'année, il est parti à Tottenham, et après il y a eu l'incident où on se serre pas la main avant le match et compagnie.
A senior figure, the defender may have had some say, but Nasri also knew he hadn't been good enough and aimed to recapture the spirit of that energetic teen from Marseille. The autumn and winter of 2010 saw him do exactly that. Back in the advanced areas, he began with a pair of penalties to win at White Hart Lane in the League Cup, helping him overcome his spot kick shyness.
Different side, same outcome.
Off the back of a man of the match showing at the Etihad, he bagged 5 times in 4 consecutive games to break into double digits before the Christmas break. From adversity, a different beast had emerged, one far more clinical and oozing self-assurance, capable of waltzing through entire back lines with a style reminiscent of a lost art in British football.
Arsenal's player of the year so far has their goal of the year so far.
Time and time again, viewers were left mouths agape as the Frenchman had sat down everyone, including the keeper, and tapped the ball into an empty net.
Would you say this is the best form of your career?
Now I'm 23, so I'm more mature. I grew up in my game and in my life as well, and that's making the difference.
Named French Footballer of the Year, he'd left UNFP looking stupid given their group stage exit from the World Cup, and even minutes in the blue shirt shot up. This was him at the peak of his powers, single-handedly keeping the Gunners in the standoff with Manchester United, City and Chelsea. However, a hamstring pull slowed the momentum and Arsenal felt it, surrendering the title and falling to 4th. The truth is, Wenger's side never felt like champions, lacking the toughness of the others, and handing Birmingham City the League Cup after a meek performance in the final, Samir was fed up. He could feel the club slipping down a bell curve and had harboured a deep hunger for silverware that Arsenal couldn't satisfy.
The 24-year-old midfielder who has spent 3 years with the Gunners has been omitted from Arsenal's squad, which flies to Udinese this afternoon and instead will travel north for a medical.
Roberto Mancini's Man City were ascending thanks to the Abu Dhabi takeover of 2008, which injected serious cash into the little brother of Manchester, and now, 3 years later, the Sky Blues were primed to conquer. So, Nasri stalled the signing of his £90,000 a week contract, knowing he could pocket double that at City, and Arsenal had to let him go before the offered £24 million was retracted. At the Emirates, the familiar sting of being forsaken for money came back, but it was his parting words that really infuriated the fan base.
What do you know of the City fans?
What I can see is they are really passionate, and it reminds me a little bit Marseille, you know, because Arsenal have good fans, but not that passionate since they moved from Highbury to the Emirates.
Overnight, their love had turned to hatred, branding him a cancer they had to get rid of. But though he went about it carelessly, his rationale was sound. City's squad was head and shoulders clear of Arsenal's, featuring like-minded maestros who complemented Nasri like a perfect garnish. Becoming integral to City, his exceptional vision and swift movement boosted the team immediately. And though his stats didn't live up to last year, they didn't paint the whole picture. More of a midfielder than winger, Nasri's commanding aura and deft skill dovetailed seamlessly with the attacking ethos instilled by Mancini.
Nasri still combining. It's Sergio Aguero.
A year of ups and downs, the Sky Blues were in a tight 2-horse race with their neighbours, and in English football's most memorable 5 minutes, City, trailing QPR into added time, levelled the scoreline before Sergio Aguero did the unthinkable. On goal difference, they ended a 44-year wait for the Premier League title, and Nasri's decision was vindicated.
I knew that I made the right decision, and tonight, you know, I want to celebrate with all the fans who are here.
By the time of Euro 2012, the national opinion of Nasri had flipped, and in their opener, the citizen buried his first major international tournament goal past the English, with a message to boot. Back in Manchester, a dark cloud started to form over his head. Following his volley in the Community Shield to seal his second English medal, he grappled with inconsistency. Nasri could go from a stellar award-winning game one week to an invisible showing the next, and it started to frustrate the Italian.
Samir, for me, is a top player, and a top player should play well every game. And I think that he can do better.
Beaten by Wigan in the FA Cup final, Mancini was sacked for Manuel Pellegrini, who signified a fresh start for the out-of-form Frenchman. Reignited, he quickly won favour with the new manager, whose calming influence eased the pressure and liberated Nasri. After a summer of soul-searching, he rediscovered his best form, combining beautifully with Silva and Touré in the mid, as well as Aguero beside Negredo on the front line. Reaching double digits in both the goals and assists departments, this was a guy we hadn't yet seen in England. Potent, purposeful, but polished, sealing another league title with a goal against West Ham on the closing match day.
But that goal pushes Manchester City ever closer to regaining the crown.
This sat nicely next to the League Cup, to which he had also played a pivotal part, putting a second past Sunderland to make it a domestic double.
How about that from Samir Nasri?
2 days after the celebrations, his smile became a frown.
Samir a eu des performances en équipe de France qui ne sont pas à la hauteur de celles qu'il réalise avec son club. Et comme il l'a dit lui-même, lorsqu'il est remplaçant, il n'est pas content. Et je peux vous assurer que ça se sent et ça se ressent dans le groupe. Donc c'est pour ces trois raisons, que j'ai décidé de ne pas le sélectionner dans cette liste.
By now, it was clear to him that the dream of donning the blue of France in a World Cup was dead. So he buried it with an announcement of his international retirement at just 27 years old. Tragically, the remainder of Samir Nasri's career is defined by one word: injury. Rupturing his Achilles tendon, then haunted once again by the hamstring, he missed out on 50 matches across 2 seasons, and whenever we saw him on a pitch, it was clear that they'd taken a toll. The summer of 2016 saw the club welcome Pep Guardiola, who noticed something about the returnee.
About Sammy arrived a little bit overweight, and last season with overweight he was injured all the season. I want to avoid that.
Knowing he wouldn't be of use, the 8 was loaned to Sevilla, who had a starting spot to fill, and despite the glimpses of vintage Nasri, he'd lost a yard of pace, running with fear of something going, and it did. Several times he pulled up with muscular trouble, and never found a rhythm in Spain, so he tried in Turkey. However, across a 6-month stay in Antalya, there was more footage of him in a bib than a kit. As his market value plummeted, the 30-year-old got desperate, hitting his deepest trough when the World Anti-Doping Agency found him guilty of using an IV drip that breached their ruling, and UEFA banned him from all football for 18 months.
Ouais, mais c'est fini là. Ouais, à partir de ce moment-là, c'est fini, j'ai plus envie de jouer. À ce moment-là, j'ai plus envie de jouer. Je sais que je vais être suspendu.
And that's the tale of Nasri, a uniquely cherished starlet whose candle burned so bright from such a young age, leaving the later years to feel the impact. Of course, his story allowed some redemption, circling back to London for 6 games in the Claret and Blue prior to his Anderlecht swan song, but it wasn't the same man. For many, the name Samir Nasri leaves a sour taste. Whether it's the manner of his Arsenal exit or his occasional outbursts, the headlines he made were often related to off-field antics, making it easy to forget what originally cast him in the spotlight. Deemed a diamond in its purest form, the gritty kid from Marseille became their prince, taking Ligue 1 by storm in his teens and mesmerising fans across the nation who believed this was the second coming of their greatest ever. He infused a dose of Gallic flair that made his teams unmissable on their day. Yet, as the tears, pulls and strains happened with more frequency, Nasri's sensitivity became a hindrance, letting the papers get to him as he grew more self-involved and bitter. You may have found him unbearable, but the most frustrating thing about the bratty star of France's spoiled generation is how we were robbed of his otherworldly talents too soon.
tune.